Hello and welcome to Glitch Cube, we're a gaming podcast, and each week we take a deeper look into the art of video games. As always, I'm Christian.
I'm Chris.
And hello and welcome back, everybody, to another fun-filled week as we dive further into the world of games. So this week we have a very, interesting topic for you guys. It's the idea that shorter games could be better than longer games? Maybe? I think that's just really a matter of personal preference, but there's a lot to say about a shorter game versus a longer game, like about the immersion, the story level, the content that's being explained in them. Can you tell a really deep story with a short game, or can a shorter game leave a huge impact on you versus a longer title? Or is a short game worth your money, right? I mean, that's a huge thing to kind of consider, especially nowadays with the prices of games growing astronomically, right? Like, they used to be $50 and then they went to $60 and now they're hitting $70 for a brand new game. That's insane. And if you spend $70 on a game that you beat in a weekend, are you pissed? I would be. I mean, personally, right? So it's just one of those things that we kind of have to start thinking about our budget a little bit, right? And start thinking about what we're spending our money on, and then start equating that to your value of life, I guess. This is a really interesting, philosophical question. How much is your time worth? Is 10 hours in a video game worth $70 of your life? I don't know, but let's find out. So there's a lot of great short games out there. And I think the definition of short versus long game, we should probably dive into that a little bit, right? Because our definition of a short game might be different than someone else's. Because we play a lot of really long games, right? So we have some titles that are pushing 100 hours, and with these JRPGs RPGs. I need to break that habit. After doing a whole episode about it, you think I would break that habit by now, but no. But then, like, for some people, a 20-hour game might feel like a short game. For others, that's a good length. That's a long game for them. It just depends on how much time you actually have. So for you, what do you consider a short game? Or, like, what kind of time frame are you looking at?
So for me, I feel like a short game would be kind of dependent on the genre. I feel like anything I can really beat within 10 hours to be short. I feel like when it comes to horror games, like 10 hours is kind of almost long enough. I feel like that's really the only genre that's like, you don't want it to go on too long. Unless it's
Resident Evil 4, and then 25, 30 hours is just right.
True. I mean, the Resident Evil, the main reason with them, at least there's like a new game kind of plus where you unlock new stuff. It makes the game fun.
And it's more action-y oriented, right? So it does break up the horror. Like, if it was just a pure horror game for like 30 hours, you would become numb very quick.
Yeah. And people have tried making games that long, like with horror. I forget the name. I know it came out recently, like a few years ago, but there was one that was, I think, over 20 hours, and it's just like, this is too long for a story. Like, it's weird because usually you want more bang for your buck, but sometimes short games just tell a story better. But
it's a long time to hold tension.
Yeah, I feel like after 10 hours, like maybe 15, but once you hit 20, especially with like a spooky game, like you just can't. I don't know if I could feel that kind of tension, because then I feel like it really would just turn more into like a game rather than being immersed. Right. But for a lot of games, when it comes to like RPGs and stuff, short would be like 20 hours, 25, like I feel like nowadays you kind of have that division in RPGs where some people want the really long games, 60 to 100 hours. Some people just want it at a good 20 or 30, so there's not enough filler or grinding, which I feel like most modern RPGs kind of gotten rid of that grind to make games a little bit shorter. Because when you look back at some of those RPGs from the 90s, you have to realize, like, oh, probably a good 8 to 10 hours is just grinding the same battles over and over again for either
just
experience
running in
or
circles
weapons.
in front of a save stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I was thinking about it the other day because there's been times I've gotten short games and I was kind of bummed that they were short. Like, I'm saying, like, maybe an hour too long.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like a $20 game. So it's like, yeah, sometimes if a game's short, you have to think about it like a movie, right? You're spending, I don't even know how much tickets are nowadays. Like, what, $20?
Yeah, which is insane. I feel like that's so much money for a movie ticket.
Yeah, especially if the movie's like, if it's at least 2 hours, I'm like, okay, like $10 an hour, which already is kind of high.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's almost minimum wage here. It's more than some states.
That's what's crazy. I'm like, damn, that's like more than an hour of pay for some people, like, or a good chunk of people, really. But
especially if they're in the service industry, making what, like, average $2 and something an hour.
Yeah, it's. It's interesting because I feel like recently a lot more movies have been trying to push like longer time frames. I'm sometimes wondering, like, is it because people want more movie for the money? But yeah, with games, this isn't a new concept that the price of games are going up, especially with how long the games are. This really long games in general didn't really happen until like the 16-bit era, right? Like the Super Nintendo. Obviously PC games always kind of have a little bit longer, but I'm more so focusing on like console, just because I feel like that's a good chunk of people's experience, especially pre-2000s.
I think the situations were different back then too, right? Like a lot of the games prior to that were ports of arcade games where someone is standing, you're looking to try and get quarters out of people, right? Like even Gauntlet Legends, which is a fantastic little game, but they have a mode where if it's an arcade version of it, your health is slowly depleting so they can get more quarters out of you. So it's just, it's a way to, it's just like quick experiences. But then with the consoles, they realize that people can sit down for longer periods of time. Graphics are getting better so they can tell better stories, or they felt like they can portray the stories properly. So it just kind of makes sense that like games started to get longer as we started to gravitate away from arcades and more into home console systems.
Yeah. And I feel like, I guess you could take a good example, even in the 8-bit era with like Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Phantasy Star. Like, those games were, compared to other games on that platform, long, right? Like, I feel like those all were around the 15-hour mark, 10-hour mark. I know the original Final Fantasy is pretty short, but, for a lot of people, that was long, especially for a game that actually tells a story. You could play Pac-Man for 10 hours and be happy, but a game with a story, it didn't really exist on the console too much, especially at that length. And then obviously once the Super Nintendo came around, the Genesis, there was more storage, more space to create longer stories. I think back, Earthbound was over $70 when it came out. Granted, it came with a strategy guide and it came in a big box. Like, it was, I feel like kind of worth the money at that point.
Games cost that much back then?
Yeah, games like almost were $100. Like that, a lot of people seem to forget that if you look back at like magazines for like, or ads for maybe early mid 90s, there were games like for the Super Nintendo that were hitting like $80. I think some even hit $100. I don't remember which ones.
That's crazy.
But yeah, and
I guess it makes sense because it costs more to make the cartridges, and there's probably limited releases. So like companies couldn't put out as many, like a disc or a digital copy of something is easy now, right? The digital copies, they don't have to
Hmm.
do anything. But back then, those cartridges had a lot in them, right? Like with the chips, the soldering, everything, all the work that got put into a cartridge. It's pretty
And
impressive.
that's just the physical side of it, right? Like the board, the cartridge, and the game manual,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. But you look at Earthbound, you look at Final Fantasy VI, like those games were so long compared to games before it, right? Now these games are starting to hit that 30-hour mark, maybe beyond that. And so people felt justified paying those prices. And I tried digging and seeing if people complained about those prices back in the day. And there was an interesting justification to some of these prices. Back in the early mid 90s, there was a lot of discrepancy with parents in games. And this was actually a big thing when the Super Nintendo came out. A lot of parents didn't want to buy it because, they had just bought an NES a few years before it.
Hmm.
To parents, what the hell is the difference between a Nintendo and a Super Nintendo, right?
Yeah.
So when these games come out, they're all of these new games back then were, I think the base price, was still $50 to $60. Like, prices really haven't changed that much. I think when the PlayStation 1 came out and the discs came out, games became a little bit cheaper, if I remember. But
Hmm.
for the Super Nintendo, parents would see these games and they'd be like, do you really need this game? Like, why would I spend $80 on this game that's probably not going to last that long? So the justification was, on the boxes, they would put, play this game for over 100 hours. And you would see that on a lot of these games where it's like, have like tens of hours of fun.
Mm.
Basically telling parents, hey, this game is going to last a long time. Your
Right.
money is going to be worth it with these. So parents felt justified buying these games for that price if it meant they won't have to buy another game for a long time.
Well, and they
And that's
weren't like
really,
buying a lot of games every year. Like I remember as a kid, I'd get maybe 2, 3 games a year if I was lucky, 3, right? So I needed
yeah.
games that were long so I can keep playing them, or they had a really great replayability or something like that.
I feel like for me, a lot of it was I would rent a lot of
Mm.
games. And then if there was a game I knew would be longer, like an RPG, I would usually buy it. And it actually really worked out well doing that. I feel like my parents never got mad at me asking for too many games to buy just because I always be like, oh, let's go and rent this. Let's rent Donkey Kong Country because it's short.
Hmm.
And so that was, I feel like when we started seeing the price tags going up, kind of justify the length. And it makes sense, right? 60-hour game, $70. Like, okay, I can get that. That's almost a dollar to dollar ratio.
Hmm.
People scream for that nowadays. But back then it was kind of a new concept. And when the PlayStation 1, the N64 came out, this just changed even more. I mean, maybe not for the N64 just because it was still stuck on cartridge, so it's not like there was a whole lot of space for long games. I'm trying to think, like, I don't think there was really that many long games on the N64 other than like maybe Paper Mario, which I think that, if I remember right, that was still a pretty short game.
Well, I
But
mean, the capacity shows with the fact that Final Fantasy left the N64 during that
yep.
era. They just didn't have the ability to hold the amount of information they wanted to put into that game and the length that they wanted to put into it. So that just it definitely shows the limitations, and I think that's why Nintendo, like licensed Nintendo games, are typically shorter, still to this day, except for Breath of the Wild, of course, right? But for the most part, they're not like long by, let's say, like Sony or Xbox standards.
Yeah. I mean, they're RPGs, because I mean, you have to think, or at least like the console exclusives, right? Like your Xenoblade and stuff, like they still create really long games. It's just Yeah, like I always feel like they always try to get that bite size playtime. And when you look at the PlayStation 1, I feel like that's when we really started seeing the games that could go over 60 hours, right? The 100 hours. I know me, when I played Dragon Warrior 7 back in the day, that was at one point the most time I ever spent in the game. I think I clocked in like 300 hours, which for a kid that was like under 13, I feel like that's back then that was pretty damn good.
So I met a kid that's got you beat 1,000%. So
damn.
There's a kid that's in my esports group currently that he showed me. So one of them is Smash Brothers that we play, right? And he recently showed me his hours played or hours logged, and he's sitting over 1,000 hours in Smash Brothers alone. Yeah. So that's he's definitely got his money worth, or his parents' money worth in that game.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like getting to like those kind of games, that's going to be like definitely something I want to touch on soon, because I feel like multiplayer, and especially when we get to like free to play games, it really changes the topic, especially when it comes to like short experiences. But looking at back then, you know, the money's worth, it's interesting because I feel like most people didn't take it for granted. I mean, maybe because I was young, I never really thought about it, right? I was always just, I'm going to spend however long to play these games. And most of the time, yeah, it was almost always over 80 hours because I just loved experiencing them.
Mm.
And I think because once it switched to a disc, it became a little bit cheaper, and which is kind of fascinating. You would think its game prices would have kept going up over time, but
that's when we started getting like the greatest hits on PlayStation, right? Like, you can pick up Final Fantasy VII for $20 and get like 100 hours of blah blah. Like, that was awesome to me. Seeing that greatest hit section just meant, cool, I can definitely get a game from my mom.
Yeah. Like I always loved that. I remember I hated the green, but it meant that I'm gonna get him for very, very cheap. And there was a lot of good games thrown in that greatest hits for the PlayStation 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the 2, oh my god. There was so many good ones. But it's interesting because I feel like back then those long games were just kind of normal. And then for RPGs, right? Your action games, your single player, your action adventure games were still pretty short, right? Like your Legacy of Kain, stuff like that. Like those games never really went over the 8 to 10 hour mark.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, once we start hitting like I feel like the 360, the PlayStation 3 eras, kind of when it changed. You know, you think about Oblivion, you think about Skyrim, you think about, oh my god, there's so many games that try to push the boundary of what if we made our games a little bit longer by padding it out, right? Think Assassin's Creed, like the first couple of them, not counting the newer ones that are more like an RPG, but the ones where it was at least still
Odyssey,
like the collectathons.
What's it called? Like a level gate to the actual story, so you're forced to go and grind for countless hours just to get more like tiny bits of story bite.
Yeah, that's when I feel like Ubisoft really kind of wanted to make their games long to justify the price tag, but also just to keep people playing, right? Because we ended up seeing later on them incorporating microtransactions to speed things up, which is dirty, like to a T. But I mean, that's just them. So we start seeing these action games, adventure games that normally were never super long because, you know, there was nothing to really collect. If it was, they were usually collected pretty quickly. But now we have these open world games, and they're making a story that would only take about 10, 15 hours to beat, turning it into a 50, 60 hour game. And can that be justified? I mean, if you love collecting things, sure. If you like exploring big open worlds, sure. But for people that want to experience a story, it makes it a little bit difficult. And, something that I was thinking about when I thought of this episode was back on the PlayStation 4. I feel like this was really the time people starting getting a little pissed off with short games. I remember The Order came out, and I actually played through it recently and really liked it. I know it's a short game, and that's why people hated it when it came out. Like, people that have played it and beat it, most people like it, but at the time when it was full price, people were pissed because it's pretty short. It's like a 5-hour game, and it's beautiful. It was a cinematic experience, kind of. And people didn't like that because, you're paying $60 for a 4-hour game. People don't like that. And that's when I feel like we really started seeing kind of, especially those Sony first party games, go a different route. I think with like Horizon Zero Dawn, we started seeing a totally different thing where it's open world. These games can go on for 100 hours or more. I mean, I've seen people log 100 hours plus in them, and I'm like, while they're enjoyable games, those games that are just long for the sake of adding stuff to make the game longer, it's, to me, not fun anymore. And as I've gotten older, I'm starting to realize, like, I'm really liking short games, except for maybe RPGs. Like, even there, I'm getting kind of testy with it, which I'll bring up in a minute. But we're seeing too many games nowadays pad them out to justify a price tag, I feel. And it's a bummer because, think about, like you're saying with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, if they took out the minimum levels for a quest, took out a lot of the collecting, and instead of a 70-hour game, turned it into a 25-hour game, a 30-hour game. While now I do feel people would actually prefer that, since a lot of people actually dislike that route where it's very, very long. When it came out, people would have been like, hey, this is a lot shorter than we thought. I feel like
it's unnecessarily long. I think that's the problem with it. It's when you're adding that kind of padding to your game, when the actual gameplay is only like 20 hours, the important stuff, then that's a problem, right? That's something that definitely needs to be addressed in a lot of these games coming out, because they need to have the confidence to just put out a 20 to 30 hour game. There's so many 20 to 30 hour games that are just fantastic titles, and they're able to tell a great story along the way. And I feel like the issue that Odyssey runs into specifically is that the story can be fantastic, but by the time you get to it, you're already kind of forgotten, because you have to take yourself out of the immersion of the story itself to go back out and grind levels and figure this stuff out, go collect some random crap that really means nothing, and then go back into the story and dive back in and try and keep that excitement going throughout the whole situation. And that's a big problem for players. I think that really ruins the experience for anybody to get pulled out that far. Like, there's a certain time and place for like an ebb and flow when it comes to story beats. Like Shadow of the Colossus is a great example, as we've said multiple times, of a good ebb and flow. You have your high highs, your low lows, but they flow into one another like really nicely. Whereas this is just like a big ass wall in front of you, where it's like, oh, you want more story? Nope. Go back out there, go in the ocean, go grind some levels for like 3 hours, and then come back. and you better still care about what's going on, right? Like that's what it feels like. And that's just not fun for anybody.
No, it's I think the Shadow of the Colossus is a good comparison because I mean, it's a game that doesn't add anything more than what the story wants or needs, right? There's some minor like, oh, you need to swim to this pillar or do one little thing that's a little different, but when you look at Odyssey, as someone who's beaten it I understood the story, I understood where it went, but there was so many things in between those story beats that just are forgettable, at least for me, right? Like looking back now, like I remember the premise of Odyssey, but all that stuff in between, like it's just kind of a blur. And it's a bummer because, people worked on this, they spent time on it. And while I did enjoy my time with the game, it's just, I feel like there's so much unnecessary filler when you could just make a very cohesive story that pulls people in. And while I love side quests and stuff, if you somehow merge it into the world a little bit better in the story, like Red Dead 2, where the side stuff really feels like it's coherent with the area, which is kind of fun. It's hard to see that in games. And I feel like right now we are in the phase in games where people are starting to realize that. I feel like some games coming out now are starting to be like, oh, maybe we don't need these super duper long games. At least some companies feel that way. I know there's still a lot out there that want to pad it and do it because people are used to it now, right?
It's
a lot of
Witcher
people,
syndrome.
Yeah. And, I loved that kind of stuff. I remember that 360 era, I loved all those collectibles. Like that was a downfall for me. I mean, it was kind of a new thing back then, right? Especially when achievements are tied to it. I was always like, oh, I want to get all these collectibles because it's going to give me a Chivo and there's probably some kind of unlock that's going to be added. And like, it was exciting back then. Like I was like, I love it. I love seeing numbers go up. I love filling out notebooks and stuff like that. But after your 200th game doing that, it's just doesn't feel special anymore. And it almost feels like a job or a chore. You think about, I don't think Sonic Frontiers did it, but there was an open world game that you kind of had to do some of that stuff in order to kind of unlock an area or areas on the map. And I'm just like, while I know a lot of people do enjoy that kind of gameplay, I feel like there's a lot of people that kind of share what I feel, where we're just kind of over that. And we just kind of want to not go straight to the story, but at least
give me the option.
Give us enough story beats. Yeah. So when, like, say you do 2 or 3 main quests and then be like, okay, I'm going to go divvy off for a minute, see some side quests, and then come back to it. And I feel like I'm not really seeing that in a lot of like AAA games. And this is kind of where, for me, a lot of indie titles, I feel like, do the time right in a lot of their games. And I mean, granted, that could be to production costs, right? They don't have all these millions to drop on a AAA game that they could pad it out. But for the most part, I always feel like a lot of games, especially recently that I played, are the perfect length. And yes, there have been times I've been mad that games were super duper short and they were full price. And I hate to jump on the bandwagon from years ago, but I can definitely see why people got mad at a game like Gone Home, where it's like an hour-long game or so, and it was full price. I think it was $20 when it came out. And while it has a great topic to talk about, at that point in time, there weren't many games that short charging that much. And
I can think of one other one, but I feel like it has a more impactful story to tell, which I think is really interesting. So I have a good counterpoint to this, but go ahead and finish up your thought on Gone Home.
It's, if there wasn't enough, I feel, in Gone Home personally to convince me to be like, oh, that's worth a full price tag. Like, obviously some people worked on it, people deserve their money, but I'm like, it's hard to justify that when, I don't know, there's not a whole lot, when it's the price of a movie. At least I feel like I see more in a movie, or I learn more about a character in a movie. And while, the premise of Gone Home is good, like, I feel like it, there's a reason why at one point people really, like, praised it for what it was trying to do. But at the same time, I feel like it kind of paved way to a lot of games being like, okay, it's okay to be a short game. And people evolved from that game and made, games that maybe are a little bit longer, but can tell more of a story in that small time. And I think that's what's important.
Well, so there's another game that I was bringing up right now. They did charge full price for it, but it was like, I think it was $15 or $20. And it's, I think, a 90-minute experience. And it's a game that I've talked about a lot on this show. Yeah, Journey. Right? Like, Journey is a very short game, but it's one of those that I feel like when people do play, and obviously the price tag and the time is going to be a major turnoff for people, but the ones that have played the game, like, you feel the impact of it. It does tell a very amazing story in a very short amount of time. And so I think that there's something, it is really interesting that, a game like Gone Home might be a really good story, but I don't know if, I haven't played Gone Home, but I know about it, and I don't feel like that would have hit as hard as Journey does, personally. And I feel like I would have been one of those people that was upset that, like, really, that's it? That's the whole game? I want my $20 back. Like, that should be a $5 game, right? But like you said, a lot of people worked on this stuff. Like, we have to give them credit. Would have spent more on a movie ticket, yes, 100%. But I still feel like, even though Journey was such a short experience, it's a long-lasting experience. It's one of those, like, I feel like Gone Home is one of those games where it's like, oh yeah, that was meaningful. All right. Right. But, like, I feel like Journey leaves you with the, like, you're allowed to insert yourself here in this situation. It's, you put your, whatever your mountain is in front of you, right? It's the same thing, like, kind of with, like, Celeste, right? So those kind of games that leave it a little bit more open-ended with the conflict that's happening allow you to insert yourself into them and make the story more impactful and last longer, even if you're not playing the game. Because I can't tell you how much I've thought about that game outside of actually playing the game. It's one of my favorites, 100%. And even though it's one of the shortest games I've ever played, it's gonna live with me forever. So there's a way to do it. That's the important thing to remember. There is a way to make a very, very short game very, very impactful, but you need to have a very, very strong message to tell.
Exactly. And I agree. I feel like Journey did that really well, right? It's a theme or a story that I feel like can relate to a lot of people, or at least a lot of people can understand it. For me, when I played Journey, I was like, this is really good. Like, for me, that would be worth the price, new. It's granted, all these short games, or games in general, they could impact someone when it doesn't impact you.
That's true.
Like, I look at it like every game out there has one person that maybe it touched them where it was like, wow, this game gets me. Like, people can relate to any game almost nowadays, because when you get down to the core of writing a character or a narrative, people will always relate to a narrative. It just matters if that game has the right narrative for you.
Mm-hmm.
And as more and more people are able to develop games from all walks of life, we're starting to see these different narratives, different worldviews, different ideas, that it's so much easier for people to feel connected and immersed in a story.
Mhm.
So you can make a 2-hour game, and if you make the character, relate to, if you relate to that character in that short game, it's, the game is going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I look at Gone Home, that's kind of like a lot of people that really liked it, like, were like, oh, I really like relate to this. I really feel it. And I was like, well, that's cool then, like.
Yeah, the game did its job.
Exactly. And, that's why like people putting a price on the time spent, it's kind of a stupid argument. I can understand why someone would be mad about, wasting time. And granted, a lot of, at least Steam has it where, think about this. If it's a game that's under 2 hours, you can at least return it or get a refund, which is nice. And I think that you can get a good narrative off of a short game. And going back to what I said earlier about like horror games, I feel like maybe that's why I was always drawn to them for so long, because they can tell a whole story pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's never like, for the most part, added BS to make a game longer, right? Like there's puzzles, but they never like make you adventure far away from something where it doesn't relate to the story at all. They always want to keep that tension. And it's interesting when you play other games that try to keep attention level or try to incorporate the player into the world and keep them immersed in it. And I feel like maybe that's why short games might do that a little bit better, because it doesn't drag things out. And while I can say there's definitely been like 60-hour games where I felt really connected to it like the whole time, that's a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to our kind of view on, how games are art, I was thinking about how this is just short form art and long form art, right? Like they're differences, but they can still be beautiful no matter the time.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, like I've been really starting to enjoy a lot of these short games. They really, I get what I want out of it, and then I'm done. There's so many games to play nowadays that it's hard to keep up. I mean, hell, I'm going through so many games right now. Like, I feel like this year I'm like on this constant wheel, like a little gerbil, just like, oh, I'm gonna play this. Oh, I'm gonna play this.
Same.
And it's cool because I feel like I'm going through a lot of these games I've wanted to play, but then these new games come out and I'm like, oh, I want to play this. But it's like, the nice thing is a lot of these games are kind of short. So I'm able to play through them within 15 hours, go to the next one, experience a nice little bite-sized story, jump to the next. I think the next long game I'm going to play, I mean, other than Hollow Knight, but long is probably New Zelda. I mean, I know that's going to take quite a long time, but in those kind of games, it's kind of understandable that they're long, right? Especially a game like Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild, where it's just exploration is the premise, and it makes sense that you would spend 100+ hours in the game. I know I got, I think 150 logged for Elden Ring, and I honestly felt like I wasn't really clowning around. I honestly felt like I was actually like doing stuff the whole time. And it's interesting because a lot of the time I kind of get burnt out by long games nowadays. I remember like Tales of Arise, when I played that, I think once I hit the 40-hour mark, I was just kind of like, I want to beat this game and just be done with it.
Yeah.
Like I'm starting to feel that way about, if a game doesn't keep my attention after 40 hours, like someone told me a long time ago, if you are not feeling a game anymore, just stop. Don't push yourself to play it and beat it. And while I did that time for it, because I wasn't that far off from beating it, it's always kind of stuck with me because I've always been a person like, well, I want to see a game to completion. I want to see what the developers had intended. I want to see how it ends. But if you're playing a 30-hour game and it's at least a 50, 60-hour game, and you have a busy life, which most of us do, it's okay to not play more of it, right? If you got your money's worth that first 30 hours, but you're getting really burnt out to the point where it might actually make you not like the game anymore, sometimes it's just worth stepping back from it. I mean, you can always come back to it later, or you can just be done with it. If you really want to see how it ends and you are really burnt out, I mean, everything's on YouTube nowadays. But
that's true. You could just finish it up that way. Be smart.
Yeah, it saves you from getting burnt out. Like I do that with games that, if I have no interest in it at all, but people like them, like, yeah, I'll watch someone play it just so, that's not me wasting time on it. Mm-hmm. I'm usually playing a game that I want to play while I'm watching someone play something that I'm interested in, but I know that I wouldn't enjoy playing it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's interesting because I feel like nowadays we have such a huge kind of selection of short and long games that, we're lucky. We can kind of pick through all this. And then, you have your free-to-play games, you have your MMOs that just are endless, right? They're not really short, bite-sized experiences. So, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole people can jump down. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, I feel like we're heading in a good direction with these kind of like more bite-sized games, as games are starting to hit more of that prestige level, right? Like say Last of Us or God of War or anything that tries to feel like a movie, like Until Dawn or The Quarry. Like it almost feels right that they're short because they don't overstay their welcome, and I'm cool with that. I really like Until Dawn, and I felt like that was the perfect length. And, I think a lot of people don't see the experience. They only see the price tag, and it's kind of a bummer. People spend money on things that they might not be interested in, right? You buy, like, say, I don't know, something for your room, you get enjoyment out of it for like a day, and then you're like, you never touch it again. Yeah. Right. So I'm like, okay, with these games, like if it's a cool experience for 3 hours, that's 3 hours that you probably really, really enjoyed. And to an extent, life's short. And if you have the money that you're able to actually do this, why not?
Well, all right, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you guys so much for listening in on this little topic here of short games and the rise of them, honestly. There's so many great short games out there, like, we talked about Journey, of course. Then what about Firewatch? Firewatch is a fantastic experience to live through. And there's a lot out there. And really, it just depends on how much time do you have and how you're going to figure out what to do with it. And if a short game brings you joy, well, guess what? Brought you some happiness. So just enjoy that. just live in that, relish in it, because we, like you said, we need to find the happiness wherever we can. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys next week with some more games, some interesting ideas and topics and all that fun stuff in between. But until then, bye for now.